Hello, fellow pushers. Welcome to Pushing Cardboard. I'm Grant Lindenberg, and this is episode 9, Stonewall in the Desert. Today's episode, 2 games again this time. First up will be my introduction to the blind sword system, Stonewall's Sword. And then the second game will be one of my favorites, despite my 0-12 record playing it, Rommel in the Desert. Thanks for the feedback on the previous episode. I'm glad to see there were other fans of Amateurs to Arms pop up. And also thanks for the feedback on the YouTube video I did on how to play Stonewall's Sword. I get the feeling there isn't a ton of overlap between my podcast audience and my YouTube audience, but forgive me the repetition if you're getting some of this info in 2 different spots. And please, let me know which format you prefer. News and what I've been playing. Well, it's probably not news to you, or maybe not even of interest to you, but the news for me was I had COVID for a week. I was all vaxxed up, so my symptoms were fairly mild, and because I had to take the time off work until I was uninfected, I thought I was going to get a bunch of extra PBM time in, but the one symptom that put the kibosh on all that was the fatigue. So, oh well. All better now, back to my regular PBEM schedule. Speaking of PBEM, I've still been playing tons of Commands and Colors. I've got Ancients, Napoleonics, Tricorn, and Samurai all still going. In my ASL scenario, my one scenario finished. The Russian, the East Front one, that had the Russians and the Germans. That was Breakout in Borisov or something like that. I can't actually remember the name. Anyway, that one's over, but I've still got another East Front one going, the ASL 272, The Art of Dying. This one is my Russians versus Italians, partly because he mouthed most of his tin cans main armaments, and partly because those Italian squads can't pass a morale check. My Russians are actually looking pretty good in this one, so that's good to see. My ASL campaign game, Hell's Highway. We're now on day 3, and we've got all our new stuff on board. I was super excited about getting more Shermans along with a couple of Fireflies until I saw all the new Panthers roaming around. In the first date, I was lucky enough to deliberately immobilize a couple of the big cats, but they're moving again, and he's got more now, so it's a bit of a personal morale check just facing them. My Unhappy King Charles game is down to the final 2 turns, and we're both scrambling to dominate territory. And plus, he's now pushing me around with the Lord General, which is not very fun. But happily, the Lord General can't move any faster than King Charles when they've got more than 4 brigades. So at least there's a little bit of happy solace there. Corregidor returned to the Rock. We're down to the final turn, and he's still got to mop up a few more spots. I think this one's going to come right down to the wire, but it's been really fun. Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga. He managed to put one of my areas on the river out of supply, and then I ended up having 2 of the 4 units surrender. But I rescued the other 2 and pushed him out. So I guess I just have to hang on. I now have enough VP to win partly through the second last turn, so I just have to hold on and have him not take back anything. But I've rolled the dreaded logistical pause, so I can't attack anymore this turn until I get out of it. Undaunted Normandy, we're still playing yet another scenario. This is an interesting one in that this is one with every type of unit in the game available. Really fun. So you've got you can have up to 3 different squads going. You've got snipers, mortars, you name it. Whatever's available, everything's there. It's been really fun. The last 100 yards, the airborne box. We're still playing that. We're playing mission 14. This one seems very hard for my opponent's Germans. My paratroopers are just swarming him. Perhaps it's going to be one of those things where I just have to kind of, or he just has to hang on till the bitter end, because I have to keep him at least 3 hexes away from the road, all along the road, and so maybe all he needs is like one last squad to bitterly hang on, but man, he's taken a kicking. Stonewall Sword, I'll talk about that later. My learning game there continues. Very fun. And Caesar, Rome versus Gaul, that one just ended. The Romans got a victory. I lost. And I've heard a lot that the game favors the Romans. I've played 2 games now. I can't say which way I think it goes, but if it favors the Romans, well, I guess I just lost with the... or the game favors the Gauls, I should say. I think that's what people are saying. It's hard to win with the Romans. So, I just lost with the favored side, I think. But it was fun to play anyway. In terms of new games to the collection, I picked up Monty's D-Day. That's one of the Against the Odds magazine games. I don't know, something about it struck my fancy. I picked that up. Also, from the same folks who recently did Give Us Victories to Simula from Italy, I picked up their previous game From Salerno to Rome. I really look forward to trying that out. I'm sure I'll talk about it in a future episode. And finally, I got an HASL module, a bit of a Grail ASL module that I'd been looking for a long time, Operation Veritable. I found that secondhand in my friendly local game store, but it was still in shrink. So I paid a hefty price for it, but I got a game that I'd been looking for a long time. All right, for the first game today, we're going to be looking at Stonewall Sword, a game that came out just in 2015 by designer Herman Luttmann from Revolution Games with the map by Rick Barber, and I'm assuming maybe the counters were by Charlie Kibler. I recently did a how to play video on this game on my YouTube channel, so if you've seen that, I apologize for the duplication. I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to keep going with both the podcast and the YouTube. I think I will, and anyway, I guess I'll talk about that later. As for the game, Stonewall Sword, I'm really enjoying this one. So I guess part of the reason it's the first thing I've done in 2 different places is I'm pumping the tires on this system because I like it so much. I love a lot of the smaller publishers, but Revolution might well be my favorite. Apart from the large guys like GMT and the old Avalon Hill, I probably have more games from Revolution than anywhere else. Most of their catalog appeals to me, so it's no surprise that I like Stonewall Sword and the whole blind sword system. This is the first American Civil War game using this system, and I think there's been at least 4 more. This one covers the Battle of Cedar Mountain. The game scale is 1 hex equals 140 yards. Most units are regiments or artillery batteries, and each turn represents about 20 minutes. The map is by Rick Barber, and it's a real beauty if you're a Rick Barber fan. Very clear. The only hitch I've had with the map so far is the streams on the map mostly represent dry streams that have no effect on play. It took us a bit in our first play to realize that the most of the streams had no effect. We were counting extra MP and whatnot moving through them. There's 2 scenarios included in the game. One is the full 14-turn game, and then the other one is a shorter learning scenario using just turns 7 to 14 or 7 to 11. That's the one I'm currently playing. You choose your scenario, set up the pieces, away you go. Each turn starts with what they call a command decision phase, and in this brief phase, players put all their brigade leader chits and commander chits in a cup, and as well they get to choose an event chit each to put in the cup, and then put most of the rest of the event chips in randomly, but a few get held out, so you never know which events are in the cup every time. Then, before any chits are drawn, there's the artillery phase. And in this phase, the players take turns using their artillery 1 hex worth at a time. All the Union artillery in 1 hex can be moved or fired, and then all the artillery in a rebel hex can be moved or fired, and so forth. It goes back and forth. The phase continues until all the artillery has either been used or passes. There's also a single cavalry unit in the game, and it moves and fires at the same time as the artillery. And once this artillery phase is done, we move on to the meat of the turn with the chit draws and whatnot. This is a chit a chit draw game with a couple of interesting twists. The units are regiments, and each regiment is part of a brigade, which in turn are part of a division. So in the Chit Draw Cup, each side has chits for each of its division commanders. And when you draw one of these commanders, you get to choose which one of its unactivated brigades to activate. Each division commander also has an effectiveness rating that you have to roll against to see if the activated brigade will get a limited or a full activation. But happily, you roll for the effectiveness before you choosing the brigade. So once a brigade is activated, then you order each of its regiments. So the fun part there is that there's a little bit of choice in with each brigade leader, or with each division leader you pull. You get to choose which brigade you're actually going to activate. Also in the chit are chits, also in the chit cup are chits for the commanders in chief for both sides. Banks for the Union and Jackson for the Confederates, though Jackson doesn't enter the mix until about halfway through the game. When a commander-in-chief chit is drawn, you can choose any brigade on your side to activate, automatically, full activation, even if it had been previously activated. As well, if you choose to activate a fresh brigade, you don't mark it as having been activated. So either way, whether it's activated before or not, it's a free activation of one brigade. Or you can hold on to that C and C chit and use it at any point in the turn. So you can spring the C and C when it's drawn, or hold it for later. And then finally, there's some event chits. There's a fog of war chit that allows one side to maneuver one of the opponent's regiments, possibly forwards or backwards. There's the fog of war, or possibly also can create a casualty among one of the generals. Drawing the Fortune of War chit invalidates the next chit drawn. So that's very tense if you're waiting to activate a specific brigade. If the Fog or Fortune of War chit comes up right before the brigade you wanted, you're out of luck. And then as well, each side has a handful of special event chits that are either played immediately upon drawing, or like the Commander-in-Chief chits, they can be held for later play. They can give your units a little extra movement boost, or slow down your foe, mess up their orders, or even give you a command bonus. The main play of the game happens when for each division chit, when a brigade gets activated. The player then has to decide what sort of orders to give that brigade: maneuver, attack, defend, or regroup. The order is the same for all regiments in the activated brigade, and each different order allows a different amount of movement, and a different amount of engagement, and a different amount of recovery capabilities. Maneuver allows the most movement points, but you aren't allowed to fire at the enemy nor move adjacent to the enemy. Attack lets you move less, but you can both fire and engage in close combat. And defend and regroup are the only options that let you shake off any bad morale effects or give you a chance to regain a lost step. Interestingly, the sequence for actions for an activated brigade is if you have selected an order that allows you to fire, like an attack order, it's fire attack first, followed by movement, then close combat. Finally, rally if the order allows that. So an activated regiment can fire on an enemy unit, then move adjacent, and then declare close combat. If there's close combat, the defender gets first fire, and then the melee is resolved. Movement's fairly basic. Each of the orders gives infantry units a different amount of movement points to spend. Different terrain types cost different amounts of movement points. There's plenty of hills on the map, but going uphill only costs extra when crossing a slope hexside, so much of the uphill movement is no different than level ground. The other two main types of terrain are woods and cornfields. LOS is fairly simple, hasn't been a problem for me so far. There's 4 simple rules for determining if it's blocked or obstructed or clear. They're really easy to get a grip on what can be seen and what's hidden. The combat system uses the strength points of the firing unit. Range and weapon type play a role in determining if you use 100% of your strength points, or maybe 50% for long range, or even 25% for extended long range. Once you have your total strength points, you look on the strength point column of the CRT. Then there may be a couple of column shifts for target terrain or weapon type, and you get a final attack column. Once you have that final attack column, you roll a 2d6 of different colors. But rather than a range of 2 to 12, you read them as digits, giving you a range of 11 to 66. For example, if you rolled a 2 and a 3, rather than 5, that would be 23. And then you consult the CRT to see if you have had any effect. The CRT is ingenious here, as the one roll gives you a range of effects on each column, and that range corresponds to the different possible cohesion ratings of the target unit. Cohesion ratings are a bit like morale levels, and every unit has a strength rating and a cohesion rating. Lower cohesion ratings get hit more often and harder than higher cohesion ratings. Having determined how hard of a hit you generated, if any, that'll be a green, yellow, or red. You then roll once more on the cohesion chart, and the colored die will give you a result on the depletion column. Your target may lose a step, while the white die will give you a skedaddle result, meaning the defender may retreat. And if the defender retreats, you'll have the option to advance after combat if you're adjacent. Close combat works almost exactly the same, but first the defender gets to fire on you before you engage. You then attack with whatever strength you have left, but critically the column shifts are different for close combat than for firing. You get shifts for having substantially more SPs than the target and for having a higher cohesion, but you lose shifts if you're attacking upslope. And finally, with close combat, there's always a second roll on the cohesion tables, even if you got no result on your attack. If you got no result, the table that you have to roll on is a special white one where you're as likely to lose a step or retreat as the defender was. I really like the combat system. It simultaneously takes into account the strengths and the cohesion or morale of both the firer and the target, and gives you both damage and retreats in a couple of rolls. It's very cool that the same CRT is used both for ranged fire and close combat, with just different column shifts in DRMs. After all the chits have been pulled, all the events dealt with, and all the brigades used, it's on to the next turn, and you move the turn marker and refill the chit cup using that the same system we used at the very top of the game. And that's how turns work. On the map, there's several objective hexes. Union objective hexes are black stars with a score. Confederate objectives are red stars with a little score. But the victory conditions are asymmetrical in that the Union gets points for every turn they hold the black stars, but the Confederates only get points for the red stars held at the end of the game. As you might expect, the red stars that only count at the end are worth more than the black stars that count each turn. But as well, the rebels get points for Union casualties. And there is a hex that the Confederates can try to take called Cedar Run Church. If they manage to nab that, they win automatically. There's a few optional rules. The return of Jackson to the game can be a little less scripted, and reinforcements that might have made it into the battle but didn't on the actual day are provided. There's a Ricketts Division for the north and extra brigades for AP Hill for the south. So far, I've only played the shorter scenario, so I can't comment on how well they work or how they affect balance, but they look interesting. I can't really talk about balance at all at this point, but what I can say is how much I'm enjoying playing the game. There's more event chits than leaders in the cup at the beginning of each turn, so it's really up in the air how things will unfold. And having the leaders be division leaders, and then you get to choose which brigade, is really the secret sauce to me. It's like chit pull with just a hint of player agency. I've been playing the game PBEM via Vassal using the latest version of the module, 1.5. It works great. The play slows down a bit if you wait for each player to play event chits, but you can also play your move and risk him playing a chit and scrapping your move if he has to interrupt the log and cut it off. Not a big deal. The procedure on how to set up the cup each turn with the chits is a little bit confusing, but once you get the hang of it, it works great. Logging in this module is great with all the hex locations reported, and there's plenty of right-click menu items to make things easier. The module is missing a notes widget, so that's a pet peeve of mine, of course, but hopefully that'll be added in a future update. All in all, great module, great game. I really recommend it. Okay, up next, an older game. This is Rommel in the Desert by Craig Basink from Columbia Games. This is a much older game. I think the first version came out in 1982. I've only owned it for the past 8 years or so, but it's definitely become a favorite. A favorite, despite, as I said earlier, me having an 0-12 record for opposed play with this game. To be fair, 9 of those were against my friend Dave, who patiently tries to teach me this game as he kicks my butt. But he's a master at Rommel in the Desert, and he's been playing it for years. That said, I played 3 other matches against guys who have not much more experience with the game than me, and I lost all 3 of those as well. So who knows? How can I love a game that I'm so terrible at playing? Well, I suppose the easy answer there is that it's a great game. It's fairly simple, but still really deep, and it gets at supply lines in a way that feels right for World War II in North Africa, at least to my eyes. It's a block game. Units are brigades, regiments, and divisions, depending on the type of unit and the nationality. The blocks are only stickered on one side, and they sit upright on the table, so only you can see which each of your units is. A common fog of war use for block games, although very different from, say, the commands and colors blocks games that are stickered on both sides. As well, units have strength points on 2 to 4 of their sides, so whichever side is topmost indicates the current strength of the unit, again only visible to you. So when a unit loses a step, you just turn it to the next side down. The map, as you might expect, is long and wide, not deep, running from Benghazi, basically, on the west, all the way across to Alexandria in the east, with Tobruk roughly in the middle. There's roads, tracks and paths, mountains and mountain passes. There's 8 scenarios included in the game, ranging from a quick 2-turner all the way to a 20-turn. So, how does it work? Well, there's not a ton to explain, as its rules aren't that complex, but in this game, the fun is all in the gameplay. As well as the blocks representing the units, each player also has a small hand of cards, and there's only 2 different types of cards: supply cards and dummy supply cards. Each turn you'll get a few more cards from the deck and opportunities to draw more cards or rebuild units. So each turn consists of players alternately playing cards to activate their units. There's different types of turns you can play when you activate, with each costing from 1 to 3 supply cards. So depending on how many supply you have in your hand, not all turns will always be available to you. And you can do a pass turn, which costs no supply, but only lets you make a small withdrawal move. Each turn, one of the players has initiative, though that can be stolen at the cost of a supply card as well. Given the preciousness of supply, at least in my experience, that doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened to me when my opponent really wanted the initiative. Then the player with the initiative plays a combination of real and dummy supply cards face down, and he starts playing his turn. He only has to have enough real supply cards face down to pay for the type of turn that he plans on making. Depend on which type of turn you're making, you get 1 or 2 moves and 1 or 2 combat rounds. A move consists of either a group move, which is moving every unit in a single hex. There's no stacking limits here, so every unit in a hex can move wherever they want. They don't have to move together. They'll likely have very different movement rates depending on whether they're infantry or armor or motorized infantry, mech infantry, whatever. Or you can do a regroup move, where any units in or adjacent to a central starting hex can all move to the same destination hex. There's bonuses for staying on roads, tracks, and trails. And if you're the Axis player, Rommel gives one of your groups an extra hex of movement once per turn. Combat occurs when you move your movements into an enemy occupied hex. The defender can try to evade, but success will depend on how fast the fleeing units are relative to the attacking units. If the defender stands, combat occurs. This is also where the blocks are revealed, and you see what you're up against, and the defender sees what's coming at him. But a warning here, once engaged in combat, it's difficult to disengage. It's not impossible, but you tend to get shot up pretty badly as you leave an enemy-occupied hex. Combat is a bit of a buckets of dice affair, but not so simple as like just hitting on a 6 or something like that. There's many types of units, and all have different hit numbers depending on what the target is. There's armored units, recon units, foot infantry, as well as mechanized infantry and motorized infantry, anti-tank units, and artillery units. Once you see all the units involved, there's a handy matrix to tell you which units get hits on which dice versus what target type, as well as which get extra dice against certain target types, and which target type has to be chosen first if possible. Really straightforward, really fun. It's easy to look at the matrix and figure it out. The defender generally goes first, so only attack if you have an excess of strength. And then if both sides still have units left, that hex remains engaged until the next turn. After the first player has done their moves and combat, the other player similarly plays their cards face down and goes through the similar sequence of moves and combats. And note that combat allows for one round of combat in every hex where units are engaged on the board whenever you have a combat. There's no mandatory combat except on the turn units enter a hex when there's enemies. So when it's your turn for combat and there's contested hexes on the board, you can choose whether or not to play a round of combat that round or not. It's worthwhile to mark the hex sides each player enters a hex from, as these will be important for tracing supply into the hex and also for leaving the hex if you so decide. Supply for both players can be traced into a contested hex, but not through. Well, that's not quite true. A hex supply can be traced into for the attacker, but through a contested hex for a defender. The friendly hex sides are also important. Those are the only hex sides that you can retreat through. Play goes back and forth like this until both players run out of supply or elect to pass. Then the turn advances and both players get some more supply, as well as a chance to either buy more supply or reinforce damaged units. Given it's the desert, mixed in there is a supply check for each player at the beginning and end of each of their turns. Units that are unsupplied at the initial supply check are fine, but if they're still unsupplied at the end of turn supply check, they become disrupted and are fairly useless until they're resupplied or eliminated. As you might expect in the desert, supply is key to this game. The Axis supplies originates at El Agalia in the west, and Allied supply originates in Alexandria in the east. Its supply lines are unlimited along the highway that runs the whole length of the board, but only lasts 3 hexes along a track or 2 hexes along a trail, and 1 hex if you're out in the desert. However, you can create supply chains by having at least 1 unit at the end of a supply line to extend it. For example, along a track, which can only throw supply 3 hexes, if I have a unit stationed at the end of those 3 hexes, supply is extended another 3 hexes. If you're off all roads, tracks, and trails, you need to be adjacent to another unit that is in supply in order to be supplied. So, given all that, you can see that the tension in this game resides in the space between stretching your supply line as far as possible and having it cut. And if you can cut the other player's supply line, they'll spend precious time and supply fixing it, not to mention taking time away from going after you. Given that battle is generally slow and grinding in this game, going after supply can be a more effective way to disable your foe. Of course, I never win, so take that with a giant grain of salt. Depending on the scenario, you're likely to also have reinforcements arriving every couple of turns. as well as units that you just have to pull out of the line to repair. And I forgot to mention you can also buy minefields instead of supplies, so there's that for the attacker to look out for. And you'll never feel like you have enough supply cards. Victory in this game comes in a few flavors, with the higher tasks overriding the lower ones. You can win big by exiting a unit off the other player's home board edge, or you can win by having twice as many units left at game end the other side, or by holding an unbesieged Tobruk, or by simply having the most units left. In my playings, I've managed to pull off some cool supply cuts, but I've had the same thing done to me. I felt like some battles were just sinkholes where all my plans went to die, but it's always been suspenseful, surprising, and most of all, tons of fun. I recommend this game unreservedly, and it's easy to find a scenario here too that you can play in an evening if you don't have all day. The Vassal module for this game is very old. I think it was last updated in 2009, but it still works great. I've played 12 games with it. It doesn't have much in the way of automation or newer bells and whistles, but I've used it a ton with no problems. Okay, time to give a shout out. Are you an ASL player? If so, have you heard of Hazardous Movement? Not the rule, but the third party scenario producer. They just started up during the pandemic, but they've got 2 scenario packs out. And I recently heard an interview with co-founder Hammond on the Illuminating Rounds YouTube show. Wow, it was a great interview. Illuminating Rounds is a pretty good show anyway. I recommend it if you're an ASL fan. But Chuck Hammond, his exuberance and his passion for ASL won me over. I ordered some scenario packs right away. That was it. I was sold. There's also 3 available for free on their website as examples of their work. So I've downloaded those, and I'm going to try one out as soon as I have a chance. I totally recommend you check out Hasmo and check out the interview with Chuck. He's an engaging guy. Just the sort of guy that we want to have in our hobby. Finally this week, for the editorial, no real rant or anything this week. What I wanted to talk about was, as I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to get a handle on how much crossover there is in the audience for this podcast versus the audience I have for my YouTube stuff. I'm thinking not a ton, but I really have no idea. I know some folks just don't get into podcasts, but they'll totally turn on a YouTube video and just listen to it without watching it. And to that end, lots of the wargame YouTube channels that I check out are basically just talking heads. They don't need to be a video at all, but that's just the format that the producers like to present things in. So I was thinking I'd convert a couple of my podcasts into videos and see what the reaction on YouTube is like. Hopefully, I'll reach some new listeners that way, and some folks that don't use their podcast player for some reason, don't use Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like that. I hope not to disappoint too many folks by posting the same audio in 2 places, but. It'll be easier, or it'll be very easy to skip over the video in YouTube if you've already heard it on the podcast. So what I want to say to you is, do you listen to the podcast and watch the videos? Let me know what you think. You can always reach me at pushingcardboard.com on the web, where you can comment on anything that you hear here or see on the website without registering. But if you do register, there's also a set of forums where you can do more than comment. You can post or start discussions about anything wargame related that you're interested in. But in any case, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on posting the audio on YouTube for the non-podcast crowd. Again, hit me up at pushingcardboard.com, or I can be reached on Twitter at cardboardpusher. Thanks again for listening. I appreciate the feedback. If you liked it, tell a friend. If you didn't, tell your mom. I'll talk to you next time.